think you should listen to this episode if you're in a place where you're really wanting to grow your business and you want to enhance your marriage at the same time versus, risking breaking it. I've shared a lot on this episode about the different phases of entrepreneurship that I've been through and the different ways my wife has and hasn't been involved, tensions and the great things that have come from that. I think there's some really good examples and instruction for people here on how to mostly ride the high parts of that story and hopefully avoid a lot of the lows that we had to go through.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody to the Side by Side Business Podcast. And we are super excited today to have a very special guest with us, Dustin Riechmann. Dustin, welcome today.
Well, thanks for having me, Larry and Sue. It's a pleasure. I love being on this side of the mic with you, as I'm sure we'll get into our story together.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dustin Riechmann is a serial entrepreneur. I love that phrase. And the founder of Seven Figure Leap. He specializes in helping mission-driven experts build seven-figure brands by telling their story.
And of course, Dustin, one of the things that I would like to get into is how we got connected with each other. So we'd love for you to share anything else that you want our audience to know about you. And then if you would tell your side of the story about how we got connected.
Sure. So serial entrepreneur, I think you could say like, wow, he's really successful. You could be like, wow, he's broken a lot of businesses and had to start over. And it's more of the latter, a little bit of the former. Just to give people a little context. So I had an engineering career and decided I wanted to do some entrepreneurial endeavors. So I had different side hustles. And then at some point, 2018, I left engineering, started doing marketing consulting for other companies. And one of those companies was a local butcher shop in Jerseyville, Illinois, which will come up here in a minute. And so in this little town where I actually grew up, but I had moved away from, and it's just a crazy story that I met this guy and he said, hey, I have this meat stick that I want to sell on the internet. And I was like, oh, I can do that. I've been doing, digital marketing for a long time. And so we formed a partnership in this company that became known as Fire Creek Snacks. And through a series of events, including COVID, that company is what led me into podcast guesting. And that podcast guesting experience has basically become what Seven Figure Leap is known for today. And so there's a lot more details in there. But about in the middle of that story, sometime around 2020, in the middle of COVID, I was up in Jerseyville working in the warehouse for Fire Creek Snacks because no one else was working. And we had to get some orders out, and I was carrying a bunch of meat sticks in boxes to the Jerseyville post office, and Sue was standing there, and she saw I'm selling e-commerce products, and she's struck up a conversation, and I'll let you guys maybe take it from there. But what I recall from that was you were like, hey, we can maybe help you with Amazon or e-commerce or whatever, and I was like, well, maybe, and we could talk about that. And I don't know that we completed the loop there. But at some point, we found out that you guys were actually on the email list of my very first online business, which was actually in the marriage niche. It was called Engaged Marriage. And so we found all these kind of concentric circles. And I'll let you take it from there on wherever you want to dig in or go from that point to present day, how we've ended up interacting in so many other ways now.
Yeah, that was so much fun. And that was one of the first times, Dustin, that I ever recognized, oh, there's another e-commerce seller and maybe I can help. And I actually spoke up. So I'm really excited I did, because
I am too.
We now had this relationship that has been blossoming ever since then. Slow at first, but of course got a little bit more engaged last year. And so we stayed on your email list. And at some point last year, Larry reached out because we had started this side-by-side thing. We were calling it something different, looking for some keys there. And then eventually, one of the reasons we're so excited to have you on is eventually you became a mentor to us, and we actually got involved in your coaching program. And it was one of the catalysts that got us not only guesting on other podcasts, but also we started our own podcast last fall. So we're thrilled with what you have meant to us in our life, and very excited to be able to kind of put the shoe on the other foot, and we get to interview you now and really get to know you. So
I'm excited.
So tell us a little bit about, we speak mostly to couples, and many of them are actually in business together. Some of them, one of the couple is the primary and the other is less involved. Some of them are more 50-50. But tell us a little bit about, as you mentioned the different things that you have done. You can go into a little bit more detail if you want, but we especially are interested in how did your wife and then how did your relationship play into your entrepreneurial journey?
It's a loaded question, and a great question. So, first of all, I credit my wife with pretty much all the good things in my life. Just to give too much context, I grew up in a pretty rough household, had no faith life, had no respect for what marriage meant. My dad was abusive, alcoholic. There's a lot of stuff there. And I actually met my wife in high school, and her name's Bethany. And as I started dating her, and I got to know her family, and I got to see their household, it kind of gave me this whole new vision for what life could be, and what family meant, and what marriage meant. And I ended up getting baptized and became a Christian because of my wife. So the business stuff is important, but like foundationally, she literally has changed my life. And so where this story continues on and becomes part of the entrepreneurial journey is, I mentioned I was doing engineering. I had a full-time career. 2009, I was reading this book and I got this, I was like, epiphany moment, like, oh, I could like do something online and make a business and still do engineering. Like the side hustle had never like occurred to me, right? Because I just had no concept of this growing up or in my early years of my career. And so I did that. And I came home from a vacation. I was really inspired and I created a website. And the idea I ran with was something that became known as engagedmarriage.com. And the reason that was the topic is because my wife and I were doing a bunch of marriage ministry through our church. And so, I mentioned our relationship was a big part of my own faith life. And then we had our own trials and tribulations as a young married couple and starting to have kids and debt and all the stuff that comes with that phase of life. And so I felt like I had some stuff to share. That became Dustin's thing. And so I started writing and blogging, and eventually I wrote a book and it has only my name on it. And when it started to actually have some success, a couple of years into writing and it basically being a ministry and a side hobby, it started to actually make sales and we started to sell digital programs. And I started getting invited to speak places. And as I started to get invited to speak, mostly at churches and nonprofit organizations, I would say, "Hey, Bethany, guess what? We're going to go speak." And she's like, "I don't want to speak." So I drug her into the business, and she was gracious and she would come speak. She's actually a way better speaker than me. And she's a special education teacher. Like she's very gifted at education and training and talking. And so we did that. So we kind of like had this period where she was sort of in the business. I would say though, the main theme when I think of like 2009 to like 2015 it was mostly resentment, if I'm being honest. Like I would work 50 hours at least at the engineering job, come home and then work all night on the marriage business, right? And there were a lot of these conversations of like, what about us? We have 3 kids, and like and I'm like, well, I'm doing this for you, and like, are you really doing this for us? Because it sounds like it doesn't feel that way most days. And so we had a lot of this finding the boundaries between business and marriage and life. But as that kind of continued on, and 2017 was a big year where I left the engineering career and still had engaged marriage going, but the main thing I was really focused on was marketing consulting. So I started working with lots of different businesses. And with that came some new demands of like, graphic design and slide decks. And like, I was just doing different types of stuff I didn't know how to do. But my wife was really good at naturally good at design. And so there was a period where I should mention in 2010, she started staying home. So she was a special education teacher in 2010. So about the time this engaged marriage thing was starting, she started to stay at home because we had our 3rd child, and she was home until 2020. So there's like a 10-year period where she was a stay-at-home mom. And for like a couple of years of that, 2017 to 2019, we had a period where she was working with me. And so we would have like weekly meetings and she would go do stuff, and she was like designing Instagram images and stuff for clients. And so we had a period of what I would say was really working together in the consulting business and a little bit in the marriage business. And in 2019, as that was kind of taking off and things were going pretty well for it financially, she's like, "I really don't think we should do this anymore." And so we were very much I don't know, like I already had problems with boundaries as far as like time, but then it would be like, hey, we're on a date night. Let's talk about the Instagram post that you're going to do tomorrow. And I was not good at separating the personal and the professional. And I think her working with me actually made that worse. And we didn't have folks, we didn't have resources and mentors like you guys. And so our solution to that was let's not do this anymore. And so she started substitute teaching as a part-time thing. She quit working for me. I hired someone else to help me online. And yeah, we can talk about kind of what's transpired from there. But I'd say that's the heart of our business together, the side by side business period. It was like a 10-year period, but it kind of went through different fluctuations of how involved she was. I've always been very involved, and she would kind of come in and out of the picture depending on what we were trying at that time.
That's really fascinating, some of that story, because I do see some parallels with us in that, like, Sue dragged me up on the stage whenever we were going to homeschool conferences, and I volunteered to have her as a speaker at an event before she knew about it, but I knew she'd be okay with it. And then she turned that on me and pulled me up on stage with her. So I found, as you were talking there, I was thinking about some of the roles that you had in your business. Can you kind of talk through, like, was that just a natural thing of how you determine who was going to do what role in the business, or did you kind of have to fight your way to figure out how that would work out?
I'd say it was pretty natural. It was honestly like the stuff that needed to get done that I didn't know how to do. And
Okay.
I'd say she's more talented than me in a lot of ways. And so anything with like visuals, design, finding quotes, this is like, and you got to think this is a time of Pinterest, Instagram. Like we were trying to make a push on social media for our own marriage business. And I had clients who needed a flyer, or they needed they had a special that they wanted to put on their website and things like that. And I could have easily went and found a contractor online to do it, but I was kind of like, well, I could spend money on that, or I could, have you do it, meaning Bethany, and she reluctantly accepted. So yeah, I think it was more, and this is probably part of the dynamic. I wasn't really trying to play to her strengths. I wasn't like, oh, you're really good at this, you should come like be part of the business. It was more like, I don't want to do this. You can do it. Like, you want to do this? And she was like, I guess, and so she sort of took it on reluctantly. So I think part of this dynamic was, like I said, me not having great boundaries as far as like making this a good use of our personal time. Like it ate up too much of our personal time. And I think part of it was just wasn't very fulfilling for her. She's not an entrepreneurial spirit. She loves teaching, and she loves, that sort of like 9 to 5 existence and be able to turn work off when she comes home. I don't turn work off very well. I love entrepreneurship. I love risk. She hates risk. And so we just kind of discovered she's not an entrepreneur. And so we're at a stage of life now where in a few years, she probably won't teach anymore in a full-time. So she ended up going back into a full-time role in special education in 2020. And so she's been doing that. So we have a shared vision that in like 3 or 4 years, when our kids are out of high school, she won't likely do that anymore. And we don't know what she's going to do, but she has said numerous times, I don't want to start a business. I don't want to work in yours. So we'll see what she wants to do. She might want to like go teach in a prison or do something more on the volunteer side of the world, but it probably won't be an entrepreneurial endeavor. Whereas I think I'll be doing entrepreneurship until it puts me in the grave. So.
Well, and you never know. It could be when she figures out, I mean, obviously she has figured out that teaching plays to her strengths.
Yeah.
And so when she figures out, if there's some way that her strengths play into something entrepreneurial, whether it's with you or not, sounds like
Yes.
you guys
True.
have done a really good job of figuring out boundaries. And it's interesting, that you brought that topic up, because we talk a lot about boundaries for as a family, in our business, in our roles. We all need boundaries everywhere. And so I'm curious about, I'm going to preface my question with saying we were talking to another entrepreneur who said, my wife's not involved in the business at all. And then we found out later that, well, she's at 2 meetings a week for the business and all the high level decisions she's in on. But, he said she's really not involved in the business. And I think what he meant was she's not involved in the day to day. So
Yep.
with that preface, let me ask, Is there any involvement that your wife has now in your business, or is she completely 100% hands off?
She is an advisor, I think would be the right word, right? Like we have very open communication. She knows like, oh, you have a cohort coming up, or hey, you sold out your cohort. And we try to make one of the things I've tried to do better as I've gotten a little more mature with this whole thing is to celebrate milestones, celebrate wins. You know, if I hired someone or I had a successful retreat that I hosted or we sold out a group, I will at a minimum involve her in going out, you know, hopefully the kids too, go out have a nice dinner and actually talk about why we're doing it. So she's definitely involved in the sense that she knows what's going on. And then the other thing I think that we've done in the last year is I've forced her, but in a way that she is accepting of and gracious to, in more of the financial management of the house. So it's not the business, but the income the business produces, of course, comes over in our personal household. And she used to sort of adopt a posture of like, whatever you want to do, that's fine. Like I trust you, and she still trusts me. But like we had a financial advisor come on board, and part of his requirement, which I liked, was like, oh, we're going to have Zoom meetings, but both of you have to be on the Zoom meetings. And he will purposefully ask her like, what are your goals for this year? What's one thing you want to do for the family with, you know, the next milestone that you hit or whatever. And so she's become much more involved in the financial management that comes from the business. And she's very aware of what's going on in the business. And I'll ask her advice, but she's just, you know, I think sometimes overly self-deprecating. She'll just be like, well, I don't know. Like, I'll be like, well, do you think I should try this or do this product? Or, you know, like, should I try to speak at this conference? She's like, whatever you think, honey. I don't know, you know? So yeah, I think she's involved. She definitely doesn't have a day-to-day role. She's technically on the board of the LLC. That's more of a, you know, legal thing. But she's definitely an advisor. And if you asked her at any given time, she has a pretty good sense of what's going on in the company. She knows obviously um, types of clients I work with, the way the schedules work, especially in the summer. She's often out there when I'm in here, and so you know she has a pretty good awareness of like what I do, and definitely contributes to that discussion. So I think she's a valuable part of the business. If you asked her, she'd say she's not involved, but I think she is. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know, like with Sue, she frequently would say that she doesn't know like numbers and spreadsheets and everything, but I rely heavily on her for just the common sense approach and just making
yes,
sure that we're not doing anything too crazy, at any given time. But
yeah,
it's been kind of fun as you've been talking. You've had some family members walking in the
yeah,
background and
yeah,
such, and I think that's really cool that you're just right there. Your family is right around you and such. And so we've talked, quite a little bit about your wife so far. But what about your kids? Have they been involved in the business? Do they have any idea? Like, if I ask them, "What does your dad do for a living?" would they know? And how do you inform them and keep them involved?
yes. I'd say in the last year they've gotten a lot more aware, and again, it's part of it's just me purposefully trying to make this a family mission. You know, like this is a business for our family. It's not a family business in the sense they're not involved day to day, but it definitely is, you know, impacts them in a big way. So yeah, we have a 20-year-old son, daughter who's getting ready to graduate high school in a few days, and then we have a freshman who's, you know, going to be a sophomore soon. And so two teenagers and a son. And the son's moving out soon. The daughter's moving to college this fall. So the dynamics changing around here a lot. Um, but yeah, I think they all have a pretty good awareness of what we do. They like to joke that, you know, in class, people will Google their last name. You know, we have a pretty unique last name. And so they jokingly like to say, "Oh, you're like a celebrity." When you Google you, there's like 20 pages of Google results. And some of those are a little awkward because they're marriage things about intimacy and stuff, you know. So, so like the different businesses I've had, there's a long search history and Google record, I guess. And so they have a pretty good awareness there. And I would say all three of the kids, one of the things I'm really grateful for and proud of is they all at least understand the option they have with entrepreneurship. So that's something I really lacked growing up. I just, you know, just had no idea. I'd never met an entrepreneur. At least I probably had, but they didn't tell me there were one, and I didn't know that was an option for me. So when I got the opportunity to go to engineering school, I was like, highest and best use of my talent. Like that is amazing. Nothing could beat that. But I always had this like itch. I'm like, man, I like businesses. I like to make money, and I like to try things. I like to experiment, and so it took me a long time to find that path. All of our kids have seen me on this journey at different phases, like kind of those 10 years I talked about. That those were their 10 years of really formation growing up, and all three kids have had some sort of business of their own, on by their own choice. And so our son during COVID started a trash can cleaning business in our neighborhood. It's actually very lucrative. And then the youngest daughter was like, I want to get in on that. So they were like partners for a year. And then eventually he had a driver's license and wanted to go make money without cleaning, gross trash cans. So she took that over and has done that for a couple of years. And then the middle daughter, who owns no part of the trash can business, she has had a business called Hello Hand Lettering, where she taught herself calligraphy, and she'll make like custom gift tags and art and things like that. Uh, and not huge businesses, but it's funded their summertime activities, and it's just fun because like they're not afraid to knock on doors, make flyers, go do the work, go ask for payment. And I'm involved from a safety standpoint, but they're kind of doing it on their own. And then the last thing I'll say about that is the middle daughter, who's getting ready to go to college. Had an opportunity her senior year to be in an entrepreneurship program, and so she actually did a group business, and then they had to create their own individual business and launch that and do pitches with it and do a trade show. And she had a lot of success with that. And she's actually going to study digital media and marketing in college. So I don't know if she quite knows that's what I do, but that's what she's going to do. And of course, that's pretty awesome for me to see her kind of following in the footsteps where I'm at today. So.
That is really exciting. And that program that your daughter has been in, I've been associated a little bit with the local one up here, and it's amazing. It is so good. And the kids that are in it, I always tell them, I say, you guys just give me hope for the future. I love to see that you guys want to do this. So that is a really good, program. And it's exciting that she was able to be a part of that.
Yes,
I am
I'm very,
curious.
very excited.
You have mentioned a lot of iterations of your own business, and we've talked a little bit about when your wife was involved and how she was involved in that kind of thing. But when you go through, you've talked about kind of the surface level things. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask, go a little deeper. Like, how did this affect the marriage itself? Like, did you guys have a lot of navigating of roles and boundaries and what we do when and kind of figuring out each other's motives? Was that a tough road to walk at sometimes, or was it you guys really kind of figured it out and you kind of went through it pretty natural and pretty easy?
I would say the businesses I've been involved with have been the biggest blessing and the biggest curse to our marriage, if that makes sense, right? It's caused the most problems and the biggest blessings. So, and I would say that that's gotten much more on the blessing side of things over time, and it started off being a real burden. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I'd say in the earliest days, there was a lot of tension around just the time spent on it, especially having a full-time job and doing an online business. There's a lot of conversations, and hey, you were in at your computer till 1 a.m., and like, I'm in here watching a show by myself and I don't really like that. Or, hey, you didn't, say goodnight to the kids with me because you were like enamored on this project or whatever. Like that was happening pretty often. So kind of the dynamic with that was, it would happen, there'd be a flare up. She would tell me about it. I'd be like, oh crap, I didn't realize I was doing that again. I would self correct, and then it would kind of get back to be a problem again. And she would tell me. So over time, she's become much more vocal, would make it sound negative, more communicative, like, hey, all right. And I've become much more self regulating. And so we've created some boundaries, some rules that have exceptions, but there's an exception. It's communicated. And so as an example, we always go to bed at the same time. So it's generally like 10 o'clock, right? And so we might go in there, watch a show, read a book, whatever. But we have like this time that I'm definitely not at my computer. And this is like modern time. But there were times in the middle of this transition, I guess you could say, where, hey, I got something I got to get done. I'm going to work Tuesday night, but then I'm not working the other nights, and I would actually stick with that. And she's okay with that because I was communicating it. The other thing I'd say that is relevant to this is we got much more in tune with our like love languages,
Mm.
right? So whether you believe that's a real thing or not, it works for us, and it makes a lot of sense in that, and it creates tension for us because mine is words of affirmation and hers is quality time. So you can imagine me working my butt off and thinking, man, I'm getting us out of debt. I'm earning for the family. I'm freeing up our kids to be able to go to college and all this stuff. I just want someone to say thank you for working so hard. Like, I'm proud of you. And instead, I would hear, why are you working so hard? You're not spending time with me. Because I was leaving her love tank empty, right? And so we found a really good balance where I I'm available. I'm much more available to her for her quality time, and she realizes that there's going to be periods where I'm traveling or I got to work late. And as long as I let her know, like, there's no guilt, there's no like silent treatment. We've kind of got past all that stuff over 15 years of working our way through it. So feel free to ask a follow up there, but I think that quality time, words of affirmation dynamic's been really interesting for us to navigate, and then just having some sort of like, we always also they're teenagers, so this doesn't always happen, but we always try to have dinner together as a family too.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have these like blocks, like these big rocks that we're like, we always do this, we always do this. And so we get up at the same time, we go to bed at the same time, we have dinner together, and now I don't work as much, but there are still evenings I need to get something done and I work, but I just let her know in advance and she's fine with that. So
Yeah, I think you've got those anchors
anchors
in
is
your
the right,
day,
that's the
in
word
your
I was
week,
looking for.
in your
Yes.
month. Yeah, and then you can kind of build things around that. And so that's really fascinating to see that journey. And so then my follow-up question to that would be, if you could rewind and go back at the beginning, what is it that you wish you would have known back then as you were starting your entrepreneurial journey, or what do you wish that you would have done differently back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no way to have ever known this in advance, but knowing what I know now and going back, I could see that 80% of the stuff I spent in time on actually didn't matter. So I was like trying so many different things and just feeling like, well, if I write one more blog post or if I do, one more SEO thing, or if I do one more thing or create one more product, like that's finally going to like do it. It's finally going to fix things. And so a lot of the stuff I did actually made no impact on the business. And I learned through all of that, obviously, and it was an important chapter. But so part of it is like I was just working too much for the return that we were getting. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing I think is just the recognition that it's not actually the things I'm doing that caused as much frustration. It was the lack of communication. It was just like, if I just told her this is going to happen, she's actually fine with it. But the fact that I just kind of stayed in this office and didn't communicate, and then she would get, mad, and I'd be like, "What are you mad about? I'm doing this for the family, and there's no appreciation for all the work that I'm doing. And well, I'm lonely, and you're not taking care of the kids." And it's like, wow, we could have just like talked about this and realized that we're both actually working towards the same goal. We could have had some predetermined sprints or whatever for how I was going to spend my time, and some steady date nights where I knew that I was going to unplug and fill her love tank away. And so I think like we do that really well now,
Mhm.
but a lot of years of kind of just silly frustration, like stuff that fundamentally I was doing nothing wrong. She was doing nothing wrong, but the fact that we weren't trying to align our goals and just openly talk about it and set some basic boundaries for both of us caused all these problems, and they're all kind of silly in hindsight, but they weren't silly in the moment. They were very meaningful.
Yeah. It sounds like one aspect of it is that she learned how to approach you and bring up topics and not assume a bad motive or anything like that. Rather, to talk about it. And so I love that question about going back and what would you have done differently.
Mm.
So when you are in your current role, you are obviously mentoring a lot of people. Many of them are married. What let's just say you're talking to some people who are entering entrepreneurship right now. What's the one thing, if you could say one thing to somebody who's entering this in regards to their relationships at home, including their marriage, what would be the one thing you would tell them about that, or piece of advice you would give?
So definitely be open to frequent communication. I think it's like, and but to put some specificity to that, I would say it's getting aligned on having a mutual goal that you're both working toward, even if one of you is actually the driver and this one sitting and doing the business work while the other's doing other things. It's really important that you both have a shared vision for why this is happening and what the sacrifice, because it's a sacrifice. Like it's, if you're going to do entrepreneurship, you're going to work harder than the average Joe. It's just, that's the reality of it. And that's okay if it's for a purpose. Right. And so like now we've gotten to the point through this open communication that she understands this is not only like a thing to make money. It's actually like my purpose. You know, like I get a lot of fulfillment out of this, and I feel it's part of God's calling on my life is to kind of guide the guides, or like empower the people who can go impact the world, like the two of you. If I help you, and then you can go help another couple. I've now helped that couple without ever meeting them, and like I've got a much deeper appreciation for this idea of stewardship. And that only came through a lot of maturation and talking over the years and realizing that. But yeah, so come back into the question. I think open communication and a shared vision, a shared mission, shared goals, and that it's okay if you're not both putting in the reps toward the goal, but if you're a married couple and a family as a unit, you should all at least be aware of the goal and realize that if everyone's sacrificing in this scenario, you're just sacrificing in different ways, but that you're sacrificing toward a common purpose or a common goal. That goes a long way toward building momentum and also making it much less painful, along the way. So
Yeah, I think that's really valuable information there, and hope everybody's paying attention and taking notes on that for sure. As you're talking about like our students, they're kind of like your grand students now.
yeah, I like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah. And so I do want to give you just a little bit of time to talk about what you are doing and kind of how we connected by going through your accelerator program. One of the things in that intro, it talked about that you help mission-driven experts build seven-figure brands by telling their story. And I'm sure that kind of piqued some interest of people like, what do you mean? How do you get to seven figures just by telling your story? So can you talk just a little bit about what you do and how you work with your clients?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for the opportunity. So the short version is I walk into the room with Larry and Sue, and they're like, "Who's your friend?" People will be like, "That's Dustin. He's the podcast guesting guy." Right. And so on the nose, like the way you grow your business by telling your story is basically what I'm doing here, showing up and being a resource, sharing your coaching, your teaching, your expertise on other people's platforms. And by doing that, you can attract some ideal clients over to your world and grow your business. So that's kind of the tactical answer. And we run a 90-day accelerator that Larry and Sue have been through. And so the front end sort of hook sort of promise is podcast guesting. And it's really a business accelerator, right? And so while podcast guesting is like the vehicle, we jump everyone in the same vehicle. We're like, hey, let's go do podcast guesting. The road that takes you down requires much more, right? So you got to get clear on who you really serve, how you describe that, what message you want to have to attract them, what is your core stories that you want to tell. And then, then there's the idea of finding the right podcast and getting on those podcasts and then being a good interviewer. And then from there is where like, how do you capture those people over and let them raise their hand and want more information, follow up with them, have a sales call with them, deliver a program to them, right? So it's really like a business accelerator over 90 days. So as you guys know, it's pretty intensive. But the thing that's different about what we do and the identifier that makes people think of us is podcast guesting. And so by telling your story, of course, is a bit of a cheeky way of, like you said, it's like curiosity inducing. It's like, oh, what do you mean by that? May I share kind of the deeper version of this?
Please do.
So the format that we prefer to work in is in like a 12-person mastermind group. So if a listener is like, I don't really know what that means, just imagine 12 people, common goals, different industries in our case, but they're all jumping in the same van and using podcast guesting on this route. And I guess I'm the driver, and I got a co-pilot in the van, to use that analogy. And so that is what we're doing. But really, the reason I like mastermind formats and what the deeper thing I think that we're actually doing for people is It's like the Jesus model, right? Just to kind of call a spade here. So I'm a Christian, and in no way am I trying to like emulate Jesus, but Jesus had a model for growth and evangelization and things, right? And so he got 12 people together, and then there's lots of stuff that happens in this tribe of 12 where you got a leader who's got some teaching and a system for them to follow and learn together. They learn discipleship, right? You learn how to serve each other, and you learn how to go off in pairs of twos and threes and go deeper with each other. You learn discernment, like let's ask better questions, let's ask deeper questions, let's get really clear on your mission and your purpose. And then there is, of course, evangelization, like, hey, we got this stuff we believe in individually and as a group. How do we go out into the world and spread it? And well, podcast guesting is a great modern way to evangelize. And so the reason I'm really passionate about this at a deeper level that I don't often talk about is like that. It's really like the 12 person mastermind group, and using podcast guesting is a good marketing strategy, and it works. And we got lots of success stories and stuff for that. But the stuff that really lights me up is the deeper transformation where someone's like, I feel really empowered and I'm connected with some really unique people I would have never met. And like my worldview's opened up, and I've got like a system, and I've got a community that I'm a part of. I'm in a tribe of people that really understand what it's like to strive for entrepreneurship. And like you said, most of the people in our community are married and have kids. And like, there's that whole dynamic that they can relate to each other on. So that's the deep answer, I guess, of what we do. But the surface level answer is we help people with podcast guesting. So
When we signed up for your program, Dustin, it was one of those decisions that we were like, I don't think we're really quite ready for this, but we need it. And so we're gonna make this happen. And honestly, the walking through that program was beyond anything I was expecting. It was so good for us because it did help us. I mean, we thought we were pretty clear on what we were doing, but as we got into it, we were like, oh, wow, this is way too fuzzy. We've got to really, and you helped us so much with that, to narrow that down and to do that. And we've even since refined it, since we've been in your program, but we know how to do it, because of the training that we got from you. So it's been so good for us, and we so appreciate it. And hopefully now people know exactly what we're what we're doing, and much in thanks to you and your program to get that done. So
I just think,
thank you. We're very grateful.
I appreciate that very much.
We definitely highly recommend it. And the other thing that you brought up was just that tribe, that aspect of it. I don't know why, but I did not expect that. You jump on that first call and there's all these faces and you're like, I don't know any of these people. But whenever you start sharing, like, here's my passion, my vision, here's where I'm going, and you've got people helping you to adjust your verbiage on things and such, you're realizing they're investing in me.
Yeah.
And then I'm investing in them, and it becomes this just beautiful relationship that it's just, I don't know, it was shocking to me. And you facilitate all of that. And so you're the person in charge, but there's some times where even you're just kind of observing and everybody's helping each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing you've developed there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, there's a purposeful dynamic, right? So group coaching is like, hey, a bunch of people get together in a group, and there's like a coach, and he or she teaches them stuff, and they can ask questions, and then they leave. What we strive to create is a mastermind group, and a mastermind group has that element, but it also, very importantly, has peer-to-peer elements, right? So, going back to the apostles, it's like, yes, Jesus was like the leader, and he invited these people to come sit in the circle, but they also helped each other, right? And they challenged each other, and they went off with each other and supported each other and all that. And so it's very much peer-to-peer and group coaching led. And then, as you guys know, once you kind of graduate from the tribe of 12, now you're in the bigger community of 200 people who have been through this process before you. And, they're around you in the first part of it, but then once you're an alumni, now we've got ongoing training and networking sessions, and we got a whole community people can plug into. And it's not as intensive as the first 90 days, but the hope here is that you continue to be supported. You still have access to me and lots of other cool people who can help you. And so we want to have a bigger community that keeps the momentum going, even though not anyone can sustain the intensity of the first 90 days, So.
Yeah.
And honestly, you just keep adding to it.
Yeah.
We try, yeah.
So I suspect that the people who are listening and watching are saying, okay, I'm sold. How do I get in contact with Dustin? So how would people reach out to you?
Yeah, real simple. So Seven Figure Leap is our company name, like jump. And that the whole idea is building seven figure brands is like seven figures of impact in the world, which, seven figures of revenue may follow that. And then leap is like quantum leap. So it's like the idea that you make big leaps in your life and your business through relationship building. And that's really what we're helping people do. But sevenfigureleap.com. That's it. You go there, you can get a free email course if you're like, hey, I'm curious about podcast guesting. How does this really work? Sign up. That's a 5-day email course that'll come your way and teach you the fundamentals of the things that we teach. And if you want to have a call or get other free resources, lots of good stuff there. So sevenfigureleap.com.
Excellent. So we're winding down to the end here probably. And what I'd like for you to kind of give in a nutshell, what do you think is a good reason for somebody to listen to this particular podcast episode?
I like that. Great question. Yeah, I think you should totally listen to this episode if you're in a place where you're really wanting to grow your business and you want to enhance your marriage at the same time versus risking breaking it, because I think I've got a lot to share, and I think I've shared a lot on this episode about the different phases of entrepreneurship that I've been through and the different ways my wife has and hasn't been involved, the tensions and the great things that have come from that. And I think there's some really good examples and instruction for people here on how to mostly ride the high parts of that story and hopefully avoid a lot of the lows that we had to go through.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Fantastic. Great. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
So we just want to thank you just so much for spending your time here with us, Dustin. We know you're famous on Google and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
according to my kids, yeah.
So we really appreciate your time and your expertise, and I know that people are going to benefit from it greatly.
Well, thank you. It's been like super an honor to be here, and I'm super grateful to know you too and to continue to be part of your journey. And I'm glad we met in 2020 at the post office, and excited to see what the next 5 years brings for you guys.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Sure. All right. So everybody, we hope that you will take what you learned today and go build your business.
Side by side. See you later.